Yeah, I've got a feeling that Nori is like Belladonna took's like direct great.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Vassals of Kingsgrave. We are here for a review of the last episode of season 1 of Rings of Power. I hope you followed us along this first watch of this show. I think we're all pretty much excited about that last episode, so it's going to be an interesting discussion. Just to warn everyone that will potentially spoil anything in this world, basically in this canon. So anything in the published books, anything in the movies. Yeah. So I'm Mary, also Nymeria on our Discord, and today I'm joined by Alix.
Hi, this is Alix, also known as Aiwendil on Discord.
We also have Michael.
Hey, Khal Wadege on Discord.
Eddie.
Hello, Teddard Stark on Discord.
And Zach.
Hi, this is Zach, also known as Alias on the Discord and various places of the internet. Glad to be here.
I meant to ask you your ratings at the same time as you introduce yourself, because otherwise we just go around twice. And I forgot. So let's do the ratings straight on, because I forgot them last time. So might as well start with that this time. Let's start with Alix in the same order.
I think I'd give it a 4.5. I think this was my favorite episode of the season. Yeah, 4.5.
Cool. We had Michael then.
I would give this a 3 out of 5. I definitely enjoyed this episode more than I think all of the others, but it also highlighted to me things that I wanted to see in this season that were only in this episode, and it made me think this should have been spread out over the whole season. So this episode looked good, but it made the whole season look bad.
Okay. So how would you rate the season as a whole?
I would maybe give it 1.5 out of 5, which is actually lower than the average of all of my episodes, so that doesn't really make sense, but
it's not
that's just emotionally what I'm feeling right now.
The whole is less than the sum of its parts in this series.
That's scary. Eddie, what about you?
I think this episode 3.5, and maybe the same for the whole series. I didn't really like the previous 2 episodes because it was weird, and probably things we'll get into. I like this one better than the other 2, but it was still only 3.5.
All right. And what about you, Zach?
I would agree with Eddie. I would say 3.5 for the episode, and I would say probably 3 overall on the season. I did enjoy watching the show a lot, but it's the kind of thing where like there's a lot of really high highs and a lot of really low lows for me in the show. It's like it does a lot of things that I enjoy, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that really leave me scratching my head, and it makes me wonder, like more so than some of these other big like IP things. Since this is kind of a new outing for Amazon, like it makes me wonder like how much like meddling there was from the business side of how they constructed this, and I really felt that in this episode, where I felt like things that should have been given more time were kind of rushed out to get us to certain reveals. And I thought that was notable, given that there were some things earlier in the season where they just took way too long, so it ended up making the season as a whole feel pretty uneven from a pacing standpoint, and it just kind of came across very starkly in this episode. But that said, there were many moments that I enjoyed a lot, and I will gladly continue watching this whenever we get season 2.
Yeah, I have to say I agree with all of what you said. I think a lot of us agree. I liked the show because it was amazing to be back in this universe. I think it was better than I dared to hope, which is probably a very low bar, but it was still better than what I feared it would be. For this episode, I think I'd give it a 4 out of 5. Yeah, a bit rushed. We missed the dwarves basically in this episode, but it was still very enjoyable to watch. All right, so I'll start us off with a discussion about the Harfoot and the false Sauron reveal that we get at the beginning. So basically, these three weird beings and clearly evil catch up with the stranger, and they tell him, "Hey, you're Sauron. Hi, we're here to serve you." And he's like, "Really? Are you sure?" And there's a whole, "But I don't think I'm evil, but I'm not sure," because he had issues controlling his powers in the previous episodes. The Harfoot catch up and try to save him from the bad, weird people, who all have weird names that you see if, I mean, I guess they're cast as those names, but you see that if you can read the little descriptions that you get from Amazon. But basically there's a fight. The Harfoot leader dies in a very sad moment, but the stranger saves the others and destroys the bad people, or at least send them away. We can discuss if we think they're coming back. Yeah, what's everyone's thoughts about that part of the story?
For me, this was the weakest part of the episode. Like the way even the sort of chase scene in the forest at the start, it just felt like a bad movie. Like it was so predictable and really not that well acted from the evil beings. And suddenly the wizard speaks perfect English and sounds like Gandalf at the end of the episode, but we don't see how he got there. It was all kind of wonky for me.
I found that little fake out with the Harfoot and the apple. As you say, there was no real need for it. Like, they really could have just walked up to him and said, "Hey, how's it going?" Strikes me as something that I've seen a lot in this season, of these sort of set up tropes that either are poorly supported or just have no real meaning other than to make some fake drama.
I personally didn't. Well, first of all, like that specific moment where like the evil person is disguised as Nori. I thought that was pretty successfully unsettling to me. And in general, I found these characters for the most part pretty successfully creepy, at least mostly up to this point, where like they're mostly dealing with like a less powered Gandalf. I think we're all accepting this to be Gandalf, or like a less like self-confident Gandalf, and the Harfoots who are, you know, not really capable of defending themselves. Like in the last episode, I found them really successfully unsettling and terrifying, and I thought that moment was along that line for me. I think my concern with this opening bit where they're eventually defeated by Gandalf is that it just went on too long. Like it just felt like they were spending like this whole time like trying to like activate his like sleeper signal to make him be who they thought was Sauron, and it just took so long. I don't know, it just kind of took me out of the scene eventually with that. But before that, like I thought it was fine. Like the chase was definitely a little silly, but I guess that was just, we had to get that payoff of what was going to happen with these guys.
Yeah, and they were basically foiled by being sent to the wrong address. It's like, oh, he's not the right guy. He's the other one.
He's the exact worst person you could mistake this person's identity for. It's like kind of embarrassing.
Yeah.
Here's something I'll say is that so of course this ends with this very I would say divisive moment where you know, in his declaration that he is not the servant of evil here, this guy Gandalf the Stranger, however we want to describe him, says, "I'm good," very bluntly as he defeats them. And I initially didn't like that, but you know, in thinking about it more, I actually think it's acceptable, because that was kind of his arc throughout this season, was trying to reckon with what kind of person he is, because he comes to the world and he's just kind of struggling to find what his identity is, and he's doing all these things that seem nefarious, and he's kind of worried about what he could be becoming. And he always has this steadfast support from Nori, you know, trying to guide him towards this goodness. And I like this idea of him kind of accepting that idea and accepting, you know, that yes, I am good. That is what I am meant to be. And while that may seem kind of simple. I do think it works. I do think it comes across right, and I'm okay with it. And I'm curious to see more of this actor, because I did enjoy him a lot as this kind of like naive, not aware of the world kind of character. And now he's obviously quite a different character after this experience. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But I have enjoyed this actor quite a lot, playing the Stranger, playing what we now believe to be Gandalf.
Yeah, I agree. I really loved him as well. It's clearly Gandalf, right? This little phrase at the very end of the episode when I mean we can talk about that now as well because we're gonna move on to
Yeah,
other characters.
that
but
made me so mad too. Like,
did it? Oh, I loved it.
do they really have to quote the Peter Jackson movie? Like, can they not come up with something
it was
else?
on the nose, one might say.
It was
Quite literally.
way too on the nose.
No, I loved it. I mean, that's why I love this show. It's because I know the universe, I love the universe, and so I'm okay with a little bit of fan service. Because like we've been calling him Gandalf for a few episodes now. I think most of us believe that it's him, or even if we want to believe that it's Palando, we have to recognize that it's probably Gandalf. And it feels good to have to see him a little bit in this last scene, like to recognize the character finally.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get more next season. They do it properly.
Honestly, that's actually one of the things I'm most intrigued by going forward into next season, because we don't really have any kind of like frame of reference for what's going to happen here. So that I guess the idea is they're going to ruin and to figure something else there. I don't know exactly what they're doing, but that's not really a thing in any of the written materials that I'm aware of. I'm not an expert. I'm not a lore master by any means.
I
But like
think it's-
Gandalf, good.
Yeah, it's like just on the edge of the maps he drew, I think.
Yeah, and like Gandalf isn't a figure at this time. Like he doesn't appear, I don't think, until the Third Age.
No,
So like this is all new ideas, and that could fail spectacularly. Them trying to come up with original storyline for Gandalf and for Nori now. But I do like those characters a lot. I really enjoy Nori. Again, I really enjoy the actor playing Nori. I thought the whole resolution here of her leaving the Harfoots was really emotional. Like it was really just like we got some time to get to know the relationships of these characters, and it paid off really well there. I thought they all had a great dynamic in a way that I did not feel necessarily with some of the connections between other characters in the show. And I guess like we're going to lose a lot of that with her being off on her own with Gandalf. So it'll be interesting to see if that can sustain kind of the dynamic there. I do think I also liked the construction of Nori's arc as well in this season, as far as like, you know, trying to step outside this is a very typical arc for a Hobbit. It's very definitely along the line of Bilbo and Frodo, but like stepping outside their comfort zone and becoming something else. I do enjoy that story. I'm curious to see where it goes.
Yeah, I've got a feeling that Nori is like Belladonna took's like direct great.
Yeah, I agree.
And like Gandalf's been like
100%.
there every single time.
Yeah, I like that she goes with him at the end because, like, when she gets back to her family and she's like, "Okay, now we'll let him go," and I understand it now. I'm a Harfoot. I don't go outside of the path, and I mean, it was disappointing, right? It's yeah, you want bigger things for her, so I was happy about that. And I mean, this way we get to still see Gandalf Hobbits interactions, and I think I don't really know why Gandalf is in this show, but I think part of it is for that because we need some kind of lighter, closer to the Hobbits part in the story. Otherwise, we have elves that are more that are different from what they were in Lord of the Rings because you spend more time with them basically, and men who are not that different, but we need to have some other kind of characters to round it up, I think. Should we move on to Numenor?
Let's do it.
Yeah. So we see basically what's left of the army go back to Numenor, where the whole city is covered in black flags because the king is dead. So Muriel comes back only to find out that her father died, and Farazo has been mounting people against her when she was gone. We also got a scene with Elendil's daughter being mistaken for Muriel in a very
Where
House
have I
of the
seen this
Dragon.
before?
Yeah.
Yes.
And he tells her some kind of prophecy that do we actually see hear the prophecy in full, or I don't remember what he says to her.
It's more just like go look at the Palantir, but not for too
Mm.
long. Otherwise you'll
All right.
confuse what was, what could be, yada yada
Okay.
yada.
And it's understood that she goes to the Palantir and yeah.
Yeah, we're kind of, it's a lot of setup for building the dynamic where Numenor will, it seems like, start to go down the dark path that will lead to its destruction. I don't know, like Numenor, I would say for me, the combination of Numenor and the Southland story was probably the weakest part of this show. I just have had a hard time like getting really invested in the figures here. I do think that Muriel has been pretty good, but like I don't know, like we need more from like Elendil and Isildur and some of these other characters. Like it's just very basic right now of like who they are and what they want. I'm hoping for more development of those as we go forward.
Yeah, I'm struggling to imagine. Well, I just can't imagine what is going to be the consequences of looking Elendil's daughter looking into the Palantir. What's it going to mean? Like, I have no framework for guessing what could happen because I just know so little about them, other than some freaky, creepy looks from Pharazôn. But you know, we all know he's evil.
Yeah, they're positioning Pharazôn and Elendil's daughter as like being on the side of those who like, you know, in the context of like the original story that like support Sauron essentially and become like disciples of Morgoth and all that stuff, like just like that line of Numenorians. And I don't know, like I just don't quite like I actually one thing I really enjoyed earlier in the season was when Pharazôn was talking about how they're going to like go colonize all of Middle Earth, and like he had a compelling argument for why he would get involved in this kind of thing, like in a suitably evil imperialist kind of thing. But like that's all I have to latch on to in terms of like what that side of things is kind of like intending at this point.
Yeah, it feels like it was almost a one-off line. Like it hasn't been brought up for so long. It just, yeah.
The whole framing of everything is weird because there's a lot of course, like timeline compression happening in this show because they're trying to tell the story of the whole Second Age basically in like I don't know how much time, not a lot of time. It feels like because it's all going
span of
In
years.
less
I would
than the
guess.
Second Age lasted.
much to this. So like the idea of like establishing like I don't know, even just like the idea of establishing like Gondor and Arnor and like all that stuff, like is that all gonna happen? Like it's crazy to think about like how much
Well,
they theoretically would have to do.
No,
Like-
they'll just like when they said Halbrand was the king, they'll just turn up saying we're king now, and everyone's being
We're
like,
king.
"Oh, hi, Your Majesty."
We're gonna build a house, we're gonna build a castle here, and we're king.
I mean, we already have Isildur and what's his brother's name? Anarion?
Yeah.
Presumably somewhere. So if they don't become kings at some point, then we'll have a problem having Gondor down the line. Like,
Well, Isildur's like still trapped in the building in Mordor somewhere.
yeah.
Yeah, he's gonna go
So
hang
I
out with
guess
Halbrand next season.
Yeah, pretty much.
It does make me wonder from a conceptual point if they might have been better served having like several casts of human characters and a permanent elven cast because they obviously live forever, and then each season or something you transition to a new set. And I know that's a huge or much bigger of a risk, but maybe that just would have been a better way to do it. I don't know. We will see.
Yeah. It was kind of what I was expecting going into it, but since we meet Elendil in like the second episode.
You
that would-
realize, yeah, very, very early on, oh, I guess that's not happening.
Yeah.
I think it's something they tried doing in House of the Dragon, but they sort of kept people on. Like I saw a tweet today, that they sort of like recast Christian Cole with Matt Berry as an older version.
Oh my god, I wanted to see that. I should have seen that.
I mean, I think I don't mind the whole timeline compression in itself. It's more that we had like eight episodes, all an hour long, I think, and like in that kind of time, you can still establish characters in a more compelling way that what they've done, I feel. So I wouldn't mind it so much if the characters were more compelling and that we felt that the way the story moves is believable, but at this point it doesn't really feel that way, so that's why it's disappointing for me. And I think Numenor specifically has a lot of promise. It had a lot of promise because it's the scene of so many political things, and we should have some good dialogue in Numenor. We should have compelling characters that are scheming to be in power, and instead we have those characters, but it's not very compelling yet. So I hope they're going to do better in the next few seasons, because that's for me is the weakest point in the show. It's the fact that I don't mind most of what they're doing. I'm just not entirely convinced either, which is, it's a shame.
I think the order of like effects here is that the timeline compression itself is making the characters feel less sketched out, because they're trying to like pack so much stuff that needs to happen into the story that like we just don't have as much time to like linger and get to know people, to get to know what they're trying to accomplish, because they have just so much things they have to get to.
Yeah, but I agree, Mary. Like, Numenor should be the setting for great political standoffs and clashes of ideals and things, and the characters are just getting into bar fights, it seems.
Well, let's hope for next season or the one after that. I guess we've established Numenor now as one of the sets in this story, so we're gonna get back to it. And we have to, because Aiwendil is hot, and I want to see him more.
He's very hot.
All right, we're gonna move on to Eregion, right? So we finally have our three elven rings at the end of this episode, and it all happened quite fast. Halbrand is healed when they get there, and he's very helpful. He has a lot of good ideas. That it's a bit weird that Celebrimbor didn't think of it, but if that's the way we're doing this, fine. So basically he gives all of the right answers and the right ideas to use Mithril and forge something that will end up being 3 rings. And throughout the whole thing, Galadriel is becoming more and more suspicious of Halbrand. All of a sudden, she does a bit of research. She finds out that the line for the kings of the Southlands has died out a while ago, and that it cannot be who he is. And she finally confronts him, and we get a whole scene where he tries to convince her that she could be his queen, she could rule the world with him. And I think we're going to discuss that one in detail, because it is a big thing. And finally, like, just to do the recap, he flees. Elrond saves Galadriel from the river. She doesn't tell him what happened. She's like, "You have to trust me," but she doesn't explain. And they forge the rings. The final making of the 3 rings happens without him, so we can presume that they are clear of his influence. And we don't know who gets the rings at the end of this episode, and that's where we end. So the elves and Eregion. What about the Halbrand is Sauron reveal that I didn't even say in the recap, because forgot, but that's basically what the reveal we have.
Yeah, I think I sussed it by episode 6 when he was about to kill Adar, and he says, "You don't remember me?" It's like, why is he pissed with him?
I have a suspicion that the whole reason this was all condensed into one episode rather than being spread out for the entire season is they wanted to save the Halbrand is Sauron reveal for like this episode, because like the moment he starts working in the forge, even a holdout like me, I was like, oh, okay, he's Sauron. And I question the wisdom of this choice. Why have this, fake out gotcha twist be the whole pinnacle of your season or whatever, when I don't know what to say.
I think it's that, and also the idea that they wanted to put some Rings of Power in their Rings of Power show, which it's fine. I think There was also something I read or heard that suggested that they intended for this show to originally be 10-episode season, not 8. So they may have had to condense down the story here. But at the same time, like I don't know exactly how that played out, like when and where they had to cut things and speed things up. But like they could have sped up stuff earlier. Like we spent a lot of time in Numenor, I would say early, but we honestly didn't have to. If they could have pushed out to expand this Eregion story, which I think we really needed, because it just doesn't come across quite right that like they spend 20 minutes together and then this like hugely significant thing happens. Like I just didn't quite buy the like process of Sauron, of Anatar, of Halbrand coming in here and just like helping do this monumental thing in such a short period of time. Like it just didn't come across right to me. And I'm a fan of the idea of Halbrand being Sauron. Like there's definitely some issues with the execution of it, but I've always liked that since I first had the thought of it. Which again, like I've seen theories about it since day one, but like for me, it was really like episode 3 where they're in Numenor and you can already like see him kind of like influencing things around him and having like a clear charisma and power over people that's almost inexplicable, and maybe it should have been more explicable in how he presented himself. But I like the idea of like an unmoored Sauron just kind of getting involved in this stuff and just people being drawn to him and drawn to what he's trying to do. I just think that they could have done more, especially in this context, because elves, like even in like again, I'm not a lore master, but my understanding is like when Anatar shows up in Eregion, like Galadriel and Gil-galad like are able to perceive his lies essentially. Like I feel like there should be more to show elves being deceived in this manner than what we got.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be a whole process where like they're trying to figure out how to make rings of power, and some of the rings are made for the elves and the men, and it takes like probably a couple 100 years because these are elves. And in this episode, it lasts like an afternoon, and you just can't have the same stakes with a story that happens so fast.
Particularly with the Mithril, which was such a big plot point for so many episodes, and then it turns out, oh, this tiny little chunk, that's enough. So, in theory, you could make like thousands of these beautiful rings of power that, well, we know that the elves used to great effect to help their civilizations thrive for the next 1,000 years. The power stakes are wrong. There's no magnificence and awe or mystery into the creation of these rings. I found all of Celebrimbor's like wording about, ooh, it needs to be circular. And I was like, come on, where's the majesty in the crafting of these beautiful rings that are going to be so important? It's so basic.
Yeah, and it just feels, I don't know, it just doesn't feel quite right. Like it just feels like they're trying to like fit it in and just explain it in a way that just doesn't quite come across. I don't know. It just doesn't seem to feel quite right.
Even something like Galadriel and Gil-galad coming into contact again since episode 1, and I think they address it once where he's like, you should be in Valinor and you shouldn't have come back, and that's all that's said of this great difference of views, this great, you could even say it was a treasonous act by Galadriel to disobey her High King. There's a lot of drama you could have milked from this, but they just really don't seem interested in it anymore because, that happened 9 episodes ago.
Yeah, and since then we found out that elves are dying and we need Mithril, and it needs to be done in 2 weeks. So the whole quest that Galadriel was on in the beginning of the season is completely put aside in like the Elven society because they have a brand new problem to fix.
Yeah, you have stakes that are set up and then immediately like swept off the table for new stakes to be set up, and it yeah. I wish it was more interconnected for a more cohesive season.
Yeah, this is really the aspect of, and I guess we can get into more like the particulars of Sauron / Halbrand and Galadriel's relationship as we learn, in fact, that he is that person. But like for me, like that was the main thing I took issue with, is that like it just doesn't like play for me like why Galadriel was so invested in this idea of like installing this guy into the throne of the Southlands, which currently, well, of course it's Mordor now, but currently our only perception of what the Southlands even is like one tiny village It's like, why is this so significant and important? Like, why is she care so much about this? And the show doesn't make it play like it matters because, like you say, like you guys are saying, it just kind of gets swept under the rug immediately. As a thing. So it's like, I never quite bought like why that was a thing she cared so much about and why she was so invested in this guy as a consequence. But like, I don't know, like I don't mind the idea of her like getting involved with Sauron in this capacity, but I didn't buy the execution of it as much.
Yeah, I have the same thoughts. Like, I don't mind it so much. I wasn't that convinced. And to me, it's not that weird that Galadriel would be like drawn to Sauron because he's supposedly a very charismatic and powerful being, and the elves do get deceived at first. So like, it's all right for me that she's drawn to him. It's just weirdly done and not that convincing.
Yeah, and the idea too of Galadriel being like drawn to the darkness and all this kind of stuff that they've represented here, I actually don't mind any of that. I think it's kind of interesting. And of course they have to give her some kind of arc, and it's always tricky to give elves an arc because they're always kind of static as characters. But I don't mind it here, and I think it makes sense to go from that to her settling into some kind of like more wise, self-assured persona later. I'll also just quickly throw in a quote from the Fellowship of the Ring that like kind of helps justify this whole thing to me. It's kind of reverse engineered to fit, but there's a quote in the Mirror of Galadriel chapter where she says, "I say to you, Frodo, that even as I speak to you, I perceive the Dark Lord and know his mind, I know his mind, or all of his mind that concerns the elves, and he gropes ever to see me and my thought, but still the door is closed." So I think that the initial intention of that writing was about the Elven Rings and Sauron trying to perceive the Elven Rings, and of course Galadriel holds the Nenya, the Ring of Adamant, that she will presumably get at some point in the show. But I think it kind of sets up maybe that there is some kind of dynamic between Sauron and Galadriel, and I totally am for that. But yeah, again, it doesn't always work as they've shown it.
I feel the arc that they presented of a humble human smith gaining residence amongst the elves and slowly coming to influence and then slightly corrupt the elven smiths and their forging of the rings. It would be a really, there is potential for a lot of drama and excitement and interest in such a story if it was spread out across a season. But yeah. One episode.
Yeah, I agree. From Halbrand / Sauron's point of view, I think that people had an issue with the fact that he had this whole moment of almost redemption and then clearly evil in trying to persuade her to come with him. The way I read that scene is more he was evil all along and knowing what he was doing all along, but he tries to break her. He tries to influence and manipulate her by saying that he felt something that drew him back to some kind of goodness before falling to evil again. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you, Marie. That was how I saw it too. And to me, that's what made the whole sort of mind bending scene where we see Sauron kind of invading Galadriel's thoughts. That's what made it so cool to me, that we're seeing him trying to show her what she wants to see to then convince her to join him. But Sauron is never good. You can't trust what he says, and it's all a manipulation.
I will say, I do agree with this. I don't think that he generally was ever like compelled to true goodness. I do think that he thinks that he's doing good to a degree. Like even like Sauron, like an avatar of evil that we understand is still like any other villain, thinking he's doing the right thing. And I think he thinks that he and Galadriel together will, create this perfect order and this perfect reality for Middle Earth. But of course, what he really wants to do is rule Middle Earth and shape it in whatever image he desires, which is the story of Sauron. Again, in my understanding of the Sauron and Mehran, like the original before he was given the name Sauron, like he always wanted to just like create perfect order and create perfect goodness, but he takes the path of ruling people to do that, and they kind of bluntly say that here. We're like, should we not? Galadriel in her excellent accent here. She says, do you want to help the people of Middle Earth or rule them? Yeah, he wants to rule them, but he thinks he's doing it for some kind of good purpose. But he is not. He is not in reality.
Okay. One question I had is, what about the timeline? What does it make sense that the elven rings would be forged before the others? Because my understanding was that the Noldor forged all of the rings with Sauron/Anatar influencing them, and then Celebrimbor managed to understand what was going on and forged the 3 elven rings on not exactly on his own, but he hid them from Sauron. But now that at least to Galadriel it's clear who Halbrand was, are they still going to forge the other rings themselves, or are we going to see Sauron go to different peoples of Middle Earth and forge the rings directly with them?
Yeah, I don't see how the elves can forge the other rings now within the show, because they figured it out, and they're not gonna give Sauron a second chance.
I do think.
At least I hope not.
I do think Celebrimbor's got the woohoo on his brain because he sort of spaced out and said, "Oh, I think someone told me that. I'm not sure." When he said something suspicious. So probably maybe Elrond and Galadriel go away, and then maybe Celebrimbor starts meeting Halbrand again or something.
Yeah, I think it's got to be something like that. Because the only thing here is that Galadriel has hidden the information that he is in fact Sauron. She's just kind of vaguely said, "Don't talk to this guy." Yeah. So there's some out for Celebrimbor. So I don't know if it'll be Halbrand exactly showing up, but some conception of Sauron showing up being like, "Hey man, you want to make some more rings?" He's like, "Hell yeah, why not?" I don't know, that's down there. It makes sense, but it still feels weird because the 3 elven rings are the ones that were made outside the influence of Sauron and that aren't controlled by him. So how can those be the first ones? I don't know, it just feels weird.
Honestly, I think they're taking inspiration from the prologue of the movies, and the movies start with the 3 elven rings.
Boom, there you go.
Well, the poem does too, in their defense.
And to the average viewer, that's taken chronologically.
I think they're just shown in numerical order. It's first the 3, then the 7, then the 9, because it's more and more and more.
Yeah, I agree. So I did write to Matt Valley to ask him if he wanted to join us. And so he can't make it, but he said that in his opinion, the next season will be the next round of rings to dwarves, all men, but he thinks it might be dwarves given that we've met them and seen them a lot in this season, and that the 3rd season would be rings to men. And I guess there's some kind of neat symmetry to that kind of pacing, but it also feels a bit forced to me. I think I'd prefer having most of the rings forged quickly enough to leave room for the fall of Numenor and the Last Alliance, and yeah.
Yeah, 8 episodes of them holding the rings and slowly becoming corrupted. I could see that working quite reasonably well with the men, but I know that the dwarves, they don't become corrupted per se, they just become more stubborn and hard, and that's assuming they're presented with them at the start of episode 1 of season 2. It just feels weird.
I actually think the dwarf aspect could be pretty good because, and of course, the whole mechanics of this feels so weird now that Galadriel at least is kind of aware of what's going on. Why isn't she doing anything about it? Or she'll try maybe and fail, but the idea of the dwarves as we've been presented, and I personally, I'm curious what you guys think, but personally, I think the dwarven story of this season was probably the best, just most consistently good with Durin and Durin's father and all that stuff. It really just it came across well. And I think how it's going to go is that they're going, of course, they still want to mine that mithril, and they're going to make these rings and they're going to become greedier and of course delve too greedily and too deep and make that big fire guy mad. But I think it could come across as pretty tragic and felt like with how we've gotten to know these characters if they go down that path. And like we see, like we of course support younger Durin and want him to succeed, but like the path he's going on does feel like it will lead to destruction up to this point. So like it harmonizes pretty nicely with me with the idea of them getting rings and becoming corrupted by Sauron, all that stuff.
Yeah, completely agree.
Sorry, some of the things
No, go ahead.
Disa says pretty sus at the end of episode 7.
Yeah, I saw something about because she is like so in tune with like the rocks and stuff because of her role in society, that she is like already kind of being corrupted by like the seduction of Mithril itself, which is, you know, it's fine. But yeah, she definitely is like all about, she's already going down that path of like, let's get a bunch of Mithril, let's delve, you know.
Yeah, and it's about the power too. She's like, we will, you and I, rule the dwarves, the dwarven kingdom, and it feels both very epic and slightly wrong, and you're like, that doesn't sound good, and at the same time, it's also about them getting their power and away from Durin's father's shadow. So I think it was very well done. That was the most convincing part of it for me as well. And I'm very hopeful for the story in the arc that it's gonna take in this with the dwarves, and I'm hoping to see more Elrond and Durin scenes, because those were really the best.
Yeah, I really agree with what you said, Marie and Zach. And I'm really looking forward to seeing more of Moria next in the following seasons, and like having the big fiery guy wake up and
Bad news.
and kind of thwart all the Vesely plans of ambitious dwarves.
Do we know when does Moria fall in canon in the Silmarillion?
Well, in The Hobbit, the dwarves are still in Moria, but I don't know if there's been events
from
before.
Moria as well, because like they were completely homeless. They didn't have the mountain hall under.
Yeah, but like
no,
before.
I think what happens is they get driven out of Moria, and they go to the Lonely Mountain. Then some help comes. Then they're homeless.
Yeah, like they try to reclaim it later. Like it's the whole thing, like where they go back and they find where, of course, like they the Fellowship finds this like Balin's records in there, and like what happened. That was like an attempt to go back and reclaim Moria much later after it was initially.
Okay.
Made. I think they were still like in it though by the Third Age. Like it was still like fully populated by the Third Age. But again, like this show is fucking with the timeline. Big time.
Yeah, that's my point in my question, I guess, because I know there's been a few attempts to reclaim it. They settled there again, and then all died, like we see with Balin. But I didn't think the first falling was the first. Yeah, was in the Second Age. So, but because that, I'm not sure what to think about the Balrog sighting. I mean, to me, it could also be just foreshadowing of the Lord of the Rings events, and the Balrog doesn't necessarily have to be important in this show for it to just make sense that we saw it, and it's not gonna have any consequence now. That might also work for me.
I think as a natural conclusion to this story, the dwarf story, it's fine. I mean, it's definitely fan servicey as well, of course, because it's like a thing we know. We're excited to see the big fiery guy. But yeah, I think it's fine. Like as a conclusion, it's one of those things, those prequel things where it kind of maybe undercuts the drama because we know where it's going. But it's kind of inevitable with this kind of thing.
Clearly. All right. Do we have anything more? Any burning questions about any of it?
Just a shout out. It's been said, but like the Halbrand line where he kind of reveals, he gives the game away. He's like, I've been awake since before the breaking of the first silence. In that time, I've had many names. Like it's such a good Sauron-y line. Like that was a very, very quality bit of writing for sure. And it's just cool to me to kind of see this character given a little more depth. Like Sauron really is just like a nameless evil. Like he's just the enemy in the books, and he's just a floaty eyeball in the movies. So like it's good for me to get to know him better. Like I actually find that really compelling, and I do find it being ciphered through this relationship with Galadriel compelling. Not everything about it's been perfect, but I do enjoy that as kind of a central to me, like, it seems to be the central kind of conceit of the show. But we have to see really where it goes from here. Like, I am curious to see him confront Adar and see that all of that play out. But it could go a lot of different ways. We're definitely like have a lot to figure out going forward.
Yeah, I think in with a lot of things, the Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion and this whole universe is really hard to adapt because you get so many characters that are quite static, like you said, like the elves are, or even Sauron is just the villain, the evil in the world. He's not really even a person or a character in the Lord of the Rings. He is the personification of evil. So it's hard to do a prequel and give more depth and nuance to these characters that clearly aren't nuanced in previously written canon. But I think they messed up a few things, but they also did well with Sauron. I'm fairly convinced by Halbrand. I mean, whatever the actor name is. I was really happy with that casting.
I really hope they keep him and they don't make him go like Darth Vader in the next season where we don't see his face anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's going to be palling around with Isildur and that annoying kid.
Yeah, just a little buddy comedy with Isildur, the man who will eventually cut the ring from his finger. I would be so curious if they got interaction. It feels like they will. It'll be very interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I've got nothing more to say other than I will look forward to season 2, despite the fact that we spent most of these reviews being unhappy about various things about this show. I think it's still quite nice to watch.
Oh, wait! I have to be unhappy about one more thing.
Go ahead.
The song at the end.
Oh God, yeah.
It was just so bad.
Oh yeah, it was quite bad.
That wasn't great, but I will say the music, and to be positive for a sec, the music in general has been outstanding, and the Harfoot song, the Wandering Day song, is honestly actually one of my favorite Lord of the Rings songs that we've ever had. Like, I thought that song was gorgeous.
I like that one.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good stuff on that front.
Yes, you're right.
I mean, I keep hearing basically one of Outlander's themes in the Harfoot theme because it is very similar and it's the same composer, so it makes sense. But every time I've got some part of my brain that's like, oh, are we in Scotland now? And it feels a bit weird. But that's fine. I thought the music was pretty good, except for that one time when it was good in itself, but it made no sense the way it was used. I mentioned that in one of the episodes. That last song was very bad.
Sorry, I brought up something negative right as we were wrapping up.
That's good. That's fine.
We've got to hold on to that for 2 years now.
Is it 2 years?
I don't know. Well, I think House of the Dragon's like going to be 2 years.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're both going to be 2
Right.
years. I think that's just how like big TV is nowadays.
Oh, don't worry. We'll get another.
time.
What was the other crap?
Oh, we're
one?
getting his Dark Materials in December.
True.
Oh, awesome. That's good then.
Oh, don't worry. We're going to get another Wheel of Time.
Oh God, that was so bad. Oh my God.
Give me more Witcher. It's terrible, but I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, at least it's kind of I mean, the Wheel of Time has similar issues with Rings of Power, except that it's even less good because it doesn't have as much money, I guess. But I was so angry at it. So I'm gonna watch season 2 to be angry again, I guess.
I'm gonna hate watch the hell out of that show.
Yeah. If you're not watching it yet and want something really good, Andor is really good.
Yeah, I am watching it. I've got 2 episodes
and
to watch.
if you
because
haven't
I'm
watched
missing
The
a
Expanse,
bit,
watch The Expanse.
Yeah,
The
I'm one of 2
Expanse.
seasons behind one, I think, but I've watched most of them, and it's very good. All right, so we'll get something, but still, I got invested in House of the Dragon specifically, and I think waiting 2 years is going to be a long time. But hey, not like we're not used to that. So
We are so good at waiting.
We might get, we might get another blog post about the book in the meantime.
Maybe two blog
Maybe
posts.
2.
Oh my god. That's what we're reduced to. Oh, all right. Well, thank you everyone for joining me. I guess we can close the podcast officially now. And thank you everyone for joining. It was a very interesting discussion. We'll see you all again for season 2. In the meantime, do join the Discord if you're not on there and join the discussion. As mentioned in this last couple of minutes, we do talk about most things in fantasy and science
We're
fiction.
big nerds. We're huge nerds.
We're big nerds. Yeah,
we love all that stuff.
that's for sure. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Barry.
Bye.
Bye.
Palando.
See you guys.
Bye.
Palando.
Orlando.
Orlando.
Orlando until named.
He is Palando.
Let's go
Well,
with that.
I think we could see Palando. Like if we're going to Rune, we could actually
Yeah.
see Palando there.
Let's hope. Well, careful, because they've sport the end of the crown.
Yeah. I don't know if they'll get that far.
We know how it ends.
It's a big spoiler.
Yeah, it's been editing this.
Oh, she will be, yeah.
Because all of this talk of Megan will just get cut out because she hates her.
Yeah.
Hi, Bina.